Tim Burchiel, deep brain stimulation for obesity. And you're not standing up as often as you should. Keep standing up now.
So
Exercise.
as Monty Python said, now for something completely different. So I'm a neurosurgeon, and I'm going to talk to you about obesity. You might ask, rightfully, what does a brain surgeon know about obesity? Well, more all the time, I should say. What I want to talk about tonight is a therapy potentially for obesity. But before we start in on that, we're going to have to define what obesity is. Obesity is defined by body mass index. You can determine that if you know your height and your weight. And a BMI over 30 is considered to be obese. That's about a third of the country, slightly more than a third of the country. It's unhealthy and it's expensive. It is slated to cost the U.S. by 2030 about $550 billion per year. It's associated with 1 in 5 deaths in the United States, and it causes type 2 diabetes, hypertension, heart disease, liver problems, all kinds of situations that are unhealthy and, again, expensive. It might come as a surprise to you to know that the only proven therapy for weight at that level, for weight reduction at a BMI over 30, is bariatric surgery. And that is a procedure. These types of procedures are done about 200,000 times per year in the United States. So, you know, everybody knows, of course, that diet and exercise are the way to lose weight. The problem is the evidence behind that statement is almost non-existent. And the reason that we find problems with this is that only about 1% of people that use diet and exercise alone at that type of body mass index actually achieve success. The reason is the brain is in direct control of fat metabolism. And it does so because we have the same brains that were developed a million years ago at a time when we lived in caves and we didn't know where our next meal was coming from. So the brain is running a program that's about 1 million years old, and we can't defeat that with diet and exercise alone. So the brain actually controls fat metabolism in a way that is not rational in a society right now where we have good access to high-calorie and high-fat diets. Now, the brain does that, it controls it, it locks in a weight at a certain set point, and it refuses to budge, even with very strict dieting. Now, the other thing that the brain does is it uses fat in your body, very special kinds of fat, to produce heat. This type of fat is called brown adipose tissue. It only represents about 5% of your fat weight, but it is the part of the brain, the part of the fat that is metabolized to produce heat when you have a fever or when you're in a cold environment, you need to warm up your body. Brain, through the hypothalamus, turns on that brown adipose tissue, and it also tells white fat to beige, to become brown for future use as a heat source. Now that fat lives above your collarbones, mostly in your neck. And when you put a person in a PET scanner, such as this diagram, in a cold environment, that BAT lights up in that area very brightly. That's because it's trying to generate heat to warm up the body. The problem is that when you have an obese individual, that doesn't happen. There seems to be a problem in utilizing BAT for thermogenesis, for developing heat. If you take that same individual, you take an individual, put them in the same environment, that is in a PET scanner in a cold environment, they simply don't turn on their brown adipose tissue. That's shown here in the lower part of this diagram. An obese person in the PET scanner will not turn on the BAT, so they have some sort of fundamental defect in brain control of fat metabolism. Now that is something that probably goes back to that million-year-old program that I mentioned, and one that we find very difficult to again overcome with diet and exercise. Now my hypothesis is that we can actually change the brain's control of fat metabolism by using a technique called deep brain stimulation. This is something that is used currently for Parkinson's disease, for epilepsy, for certain kinds of tremor. It's proven to be extremely successful, and in fact my team at OHSU was the first place in the United States ever to do this. So we've had great success with this, and now we think we can use the same type of technology to control fat metabolism in individuals that have that problem, that defect that I mentioned. So we're going to use deep brain stimulation, we hope in the future, to overcome that basic defect in fat metabolism you see in obese individuals. And the reason I can say that now is we've actually started some of this work in laboratory animals. So what we hope to do is through deep brain stimulation, as shown in this diagram, we can actually stimulate the brain to turn on brown adipose tissue metabolism, heating up the body and producing weight loss through that mechanism. So in the laboratory, we're able to produce a fat rat by giving them access to high-fat diet. And when we do that, animals will continue to gain weight on that diet. When we use this therapy called deep brain stimulation, we can show that the animals that are stimulated lose weight, even though they continue to eat the same diet, whereas the unstimulated animals continue to gain weight at a very rapid level. So that's just the most preliminary information we have on this. We think we may be onto something that looks like a therapy. We hope that someday deep brain stimulation may prove to be an alternative to bariatric surgery, to gastric bypass, probably going to be safer and a little bit more physiologic. And we hope that in the future we'll see DBS as one of the tools we can use to control weight. Thank you very much.